The hermit king left the castle with all his men, and they went through all the kingdom to those places the Moors had taken. They did not find one more that they wanted to spare, and they went all the way to the port of Southampton, where they found all the vessels and ships on which they had come. Afterward the king ordered that any Moor who came to the island of England, no matter what his business might be, should die without mercy. When they had retaken the entire kingdom, the king's vow was fulfilled, and all the people went into the city of Warwick. When the countess learned that the king was coming, she went out to welcome him with all the ladies and maidens of the city, since not one man had stayed there except the sick and wounded. When the countess was near the king, she fell to her knees, and all the other women shouted in a loud voice, "Welcome, victorious king!" The victorious gentleman embraced them all one by one, and took the countess's hand, and they walked along, talking until they were inside the city. The countess thanked him profusely for all the honor he had bestowed on her son, and then she thanked all the other great lords. Having rested for a few days, the hermit king was in his chamber one day, thinking to himself. Since he had ended the war, and the entire kingdom was at peace, he decided to reveal who he was to his wife, the countess, and to all the others, so that he could return the royal scepter to the first king, and go back to his penance. He called his chamberlain, and giving him the half-ring he had divided with the countess before going to Jerusalem, he told him to speak to her and give her the ring. The chamberlain quickly went to the countess, and kneeling before her, he said, "My lady, one who has loved and continues to love you sends you this ring." The countess took the ring, and when she looked at it, she turned pale. She ran into her chamber and opened a box where she kept the other part of the ring. She put the two parts together and saw they were one piece, revealing the family arms. She understood that it belonged to her husband, the count, and she cried out, "Tell me, sir, where is my husband, the Count of Warwick?" And she tried to find the door to leave the chamber, but in her confusion she could not. Then she fell to the floor in a faint. When the chamberlain saw what a state the countess was in, he ran to the king in fright. The king said, "My friend, what's wrong? What news do you bring me?" The chamberlain fell to his knees before him and said, "I dearly wish you had not sent me. I don't know what special power that ring has, or if it was made by sorcery and your worship took it from the Moors, because as soon as the countess placed it on her finger, she fell to the floor, dead." The king got up from his seat and quickly went to her chamber, where he found her, more dead than alive, with all the doctors at her side. As soon as the countess regained consciousness, she saw her husband and king, and she quickly got up and knelt before him to kiss his feet and his hands, but he would not allow it, and instead he took her arm and lifted her from the floor, and embraced and kissed her many times. Then he revealed who he was to all the lords in the kingdom and to the entire town, and all the lords and ladies came to honor the king and their new queen. When the son learned that the king was his father, he hurried to the chamber and knelt and kissed his hands and feet many times over. There were great celebrations, and after 9 days 400 carts arrived, loaded with gold and silver, jewels, and very valuable items which they had found in the Moors' possession. The king ordered the jewels, the gold, and the silver to be given to the 4 lords, the Duke of Gloucester, the Duke of Bedford, the Count of Salisbury, and the Count of Stafford. After this had been done, the king called a general council for the following day. When they were all present, the king came into the council chamber in his royal robes, the crown on his head, and the scepter in his hand, and sitting down, he said, "My lord and king, your highness must be content with the grace that Almighty God has given you, for with the help of your vassal you have recovered the entire Isle of England. And so, in the presence of all these worthy lords, I return to you the kingdom, the crown, the scepter, and the royal robes." He immediately removed the garments and dressed again in his habit. The king and all his barons recognized his great virtue and gentility and gave him many thanks. The king asked him to remain in his court and offered to make him Prince of Wales, but he excused himself, saying that he would not leave God's service for the vanities of this world. Then he left the king and those in the court and went to his village about a league from the city, and there he rested for a few days. When the countess learned that her husband had gone, she left the castle without saying a word to the king or anyone, and went with her ladies and maidens to be with her husband. Within a few days the king and his people were ready to leave. Then the hermit count told his son to go with the king and to serve him fully. and if disagreements arose in the kingdom, in no case should he turn against the king and his lord. After the king had left for London, the countess begged her husband, "My lord, let me stay with you so that I may serve you. Let us make a hermitage separated in two parts, with a church in between." So much did the countess implore him that the count was forced to obey her. The countess then wanted to go to another site that was lovely, with many trees and a beautiful clear spring, and in the middle of the fine meadow was a pine tree of striking beauty, and every day all the wild beasts of the forest came to drink from that clear spring. When the hermitage was finished, and the count and the countess were about to go and live in it, the Count of Northumberland arrived, as ambassador of the king, and asked them to go to London, for the king was to marry the daughter of the King of France, and if the count could not go, the countess was requested to go, for she needed to teach the queen the customs of England. The Count Hermit answered, "Ambassador, tell his majesty the king that I would be very happy to serve his excellency, but I cannot abandon the vow I made to serve God. As for the countess, her presence there can take the place of both of us." The countess would have preferred to remain behind and serve her husband, but when she saw her husband's wishes, she realized her duty to the king. She agreed to go. The count left them with many tears and went to the hermitage, and every day after prayer he went underneath the beautiful tree to see the animals drink from the clear spring. End of chapter 1.